I know many of you are familiar with benchmarking, but I think it's important we all understand the fundamentals, beginning with the definition. Benchmarking is a continuous, systemic process for evaluating the products, services, and work processes of organizations that are recognized as representing best practices for the purpose of organizational improvement. In other words, benchmarking is a process for identifying successful organizations and what they do to be successful, and do it in such a way that what is learned can be incorporated into your own organization. There are three primary types of benchmarking: internal, competitive, and functional. Because the specific business practices of many organizations are performed in more than one location, one department, one division, or even one country, they limit their benchmarking activities to internal business practices on the assumption that there are differences in the work processes as a result of differences in geography, local organizational history, the nature of managers and employees in different locations, and so on. Many organizations are able to realize immediate gains by identifying their best internal business practices and then transferring that information to other parts of their organization. The second type is called competitive benchmarking. This involves the products, services, and work processes of your direct competitors. This is especially valuable information because your competitors' practices affect the perceptions of your customers, suppliers, shareholders, potential customers, and the industry watchers, all of whom have a direct effect on your business success. Also, competitors use technologies and practices that are the same or very similar to your own, and lessons learned from competitors can usually be transferred without a lot of difficulty. The third is functional or generic benchmarking. This involves the products, services, and work processes of organizations that may or may not be your direct competitor. The objective of functional benchmarking is to identify best practices in any type of organization that has established a reputation for excellence in a specific area. Functional should be applied broadly and can apply to manufacturing, engineering, human resources, marketing, distribution, billing, payroll, and I think you get the idea. What then is global benchmarking? It is the benchmarking of global organizations to identify their local practices. It is the selection and application of global excellent practices as standards for your own organization's performance. In today's economy, no organization can corner the market on good ideas. Go-it-alone types will only reinvent their own wheels. To compete, we all must expand our learning from the experiences of others. Global organizations like Motorola, General Electric, IBM, Ford, Siemens, Mitsubishi have used benchmarking to do just that, to learn from others how to help produce dramatic improvements in their processes and profits. They use the benchmarking process to ferret out the root causes of the operating differences between themselves and their benchmarking partners. And then by adopting and adapting the exemplary practices used by others, they have been able to accelerate their own progress. Global benchmarking requires several elements to be successful: a well-designed performance measurement and benchmarking process, senior management support, training for the study team, a useful information technology system, and resources, especially time and funding. A sound benchmarking program is based on an iterative process that covers a minimum of 4 phases. First, establishing the plan, conducting the study, third, diagnosing the data, and finally, internalizing the results you've gathered and taking action. Let me emphasize the word iterative. Although benchmarking is a process that builds step by step, it is nonetheless a flexible process. After each step, a previous step can be revisited and the basic direction of the study altered as necessary. For example, once data has been gathered, you may discover that you have obtained information beyond the scope of the original study and either choose to expand the scope of the study or put the new data aside for use later. Now, let's walk through each of the 4 processes. Phase 1, establishing the plan. In establishing a plan for a benchmarking effort, there are several questions to answer. What subject will be benchmarked? Who are the best organizations to be benchmarked? And will they be cooperative partners? By what method will you gather the data? The first purpose of this first phase is to organize. That is, to ensure that the project has a clear focus by prioritizing the functions or processes to study, selecting your benchmarking partners, obtaining support from the process owners and stakeholders, and assigning the project to a team. The benchmarking team will have to decide which of your work processes are the most critical to overall success, how it is measured, and document the work process by a flow chart with as much detail as possible, reflecting all the process steps, inputs and outputs, and the measures for each step. One of the most important decisions to make is deciding who will be your benchmark partners. In selecting global benchmarking partners, the key factors should be their performance excellence, but also that they are enthusiastic about participating and that they will be fully accessible. How you gather the data will depend on whether your study is internal, competitive, or functional, but in any case, you will need a questionnaire, a list of questions you want to ask your partners. In developing the questionnaire, keep it short and significant. Phase 2, conducting the study. In considering who should conduct the study, the most effective method is to construct a team consisting of those people who will be implementing the process changes that are developed as a result of the study. However, many organizations hire consultants to conduct their benchmarking studies. Consultants can be very valuable when you are unable to be objective about the subject or when access to competitive organizations is difficult. But you also need the benefit of some first-hand information, like the choosing of vendors. The best method for gathering data is a site visit, because it is always advantageous to observe a work process firsthand and to get to know your partners better. Since effective benchmarking requires the careful building of an environment of trust, cooperation, and learning between organizations, developing such mutual respect requires a common benchmarking process and requires a shared understanding of the ethical guidelines. Never ask others to tell you things you would not be willing to reciprocate, and never misrepresent yourself or your company, and always respect one another's proprietary rights. Phase 3, diagnosing the data. Evaluating the data you have gathered is as simple as answering the following questions. What does the study data tell you? Is the competition better? If so, how much better? Why are they better? And what have I learned that I can put into action to improve our operations? Begin by tabulating the data you have gathered and determine if your partner is better than you. The delta between your performance and them is called the gap. And there will be three kinds of gaps. Negative, when the external practices are superior. Parity, where there is no significant difference between you and your partners. And superior, or positive, when your internal practices are the superior. During your data gathering, you should have paid attention to what kind of drivers may be at work within your partner's organizations. In other words, if you have done a good study, then you will have a good feel for why the superior benchmark is the best. In other words, what is driving the superior performance? Some of the most common things are business practices, the work process itself, work standards, and the work environment. You should also understand the economics of your partner's industry and their country, including national and internal culture. Phase 4, internalizing results and taking action. The final phase of benchmarking focuses on how to integrate the study results into your organization's business operations and how to take action to close the gaps. This begins with communicating the benchmark findings. Management will need to know the basis for the new benchmarks in order to buy into their rationale. In preparing a formal communications, you should rank the recommendations, agree on an implementation strategy and an action plan, develop measurement and tracking schedules, and assign responsibility for managing and recalibrating the improvements. Action planning requires creativity for amending the activities and tasks that have to be improved. New practices and process changes have to be clearly defined and the responsibilities, roles, and rewards stated. Usually some kind of project management tool will help because monitoring the action plans is essential to implementing the new standards. A recalibration process is important to ensure that the benchmarks are reevaluated, updated, and based on the latest methods and best practices. The ultimate success of any benchmarking effort depends upon how well the partners and the participants understand these 4 phases and exercise the knowledge and discipline necessary to assure that all the elements are covered with mutual understanding. When that happens, everyone benefits with improved quality and performance, reduced costs, increased productivity, new ideas, and a willingness to change. Successful global benchmarking depends upon self-assessment and the ability to translate international practices that work in another context into a process appropriate to your own organization. It is the essence of creativity and the pursuit of innovation and value. We all know that some organizations fear losing competitive advantage by sharing information. Of course, few organizations would or should share competitive or proprietary information with competitors or unauthorized others. But the realm of proprietary advantage in today's open economy is really quite small. Real competitive advantages is in speed and the quality of execution and deployment, not proprietary information. Those new to benchmarking are always astonished by the willingness of others to share. But people like to share their success stories because they are proud of what they do. Let's take a look at a few examples of the pursuit of innovative processes and unique value by the conduct of global benchmarking. The Singapore operation of a Swiss bank was being pressed by its headquarters for specific targets that would increase the productivity of its 200-person staff. Rather than merely brainstorming a response, the Singapore staff decided to pursue performance benchmarks. They approached their local competitors, as well as branches of other Swiss banks, in 7 international capitals in Asia, South and North America, and Europe. The benchmark study resulted in a set of objectives and measures to align their branch goals with their Zurich headquarters, the alignment of functional goals with their business goals, and establishing transparency in awarding bonuses. The results thus far are very encouraging. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade desired to provide their members solid advice on how to succeed in Mexico's marketplace. They joined with the Council on Australian-Latin American Relations to benchmark how trade organizations in Japan, America, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom provided similar advice. In addition, they dialogued with their contacts in Mexico and sought input from several Mexican business associations. The result was a success-based publication describing Mexico's markets, business rules, tips on how to interact with Mexican business people, advice on social issues, political and economic policy, and cultural issues. The book is titled Doing Business in Mexico, a practical guide on how to break into the Mexican market. A client interested in entering the Latin American pay TV market conducted a broad benchmark study to determine what investment and performance standards would be necessary. The participants included potential Latin American competitors, U.S., Australian, and United Kingdom pay TV providers, as well as a sample survey of potential customers throughout Latin America. The conclusion was that the pay TV market was in a precarious state, with revenues decreasing and expenses increasing, and that a partnership with either an operator or content provider would be necessary before attempting to enter the market. The client's decision is currently on hold. Another study involves G&G Engineering in County Mayo, Ireland. A few years ago, the 20-year-old startup producer of precision-pressed components wanted to expand their capacity. They began with a broad benchmarking study of the current performance standards against their competitors, as well as the leading precision parts producers in the UK, Germany, United States, and Brazil. Armed with the knowledge where they were strong and where they lagged, G&G produced a strategic plan to pursue top-of-the-line customers, update their current machinery, and invest in adjustable, state-of-the-art tooling equipment. Last year, their sales per employee was up 32%, and value added per employee was up 21%. They also now can boast a customer list that includes Dell, Volvo, and Jaguar. Finally, the World Bank undertook a broad benchmarking study of preparedness of Latin American and Caribbean higher education to partner in the global knowledge economy. The study profiled finance, quality, internal and external efficiency, equity, management science and technology, and internationalization. The findings showed that efforts to modernize tertiary education, while insufficient in scale for the challenges ahead, are generally in line with international best practices. I particularly mention this example for 2 reasons. First, for those of you in education will know that global benchmarking works in your field. Second, to let you know that there are a host of benchmarking studies available from the World Bank. Just go to their website, www.worldbank.org and search their Papers and Links section. The main point is that regardless of your field, industry, or nationality, global benchmarking can be a valuable tool for you in the quest for competitiveness, but especially in achieving best practices in innovation, value, and security. All you have to do is get started. If you want additional information, let me suggest a book by a friend, Bob Camp. It is titled Global Cases in Benchmarking: Best Practices from Organizations Around the World. As I mentioned, some training is required, and that it can be obtained from a variety of sources, such as consultants, adult education programs, and professional and industrial associations. You should first check with your own associations and affiliations and those of your organization. If this doesn't get you started, check out www.business.com. Look on their benchmarking and best practices page, where you will find an extensive list of association websites, including the American Productivity and Quality Center, APQC, which can be a particularly helpful organization, although it does cost something to belong. That is not true of all associations, however. Another site is www.jayde.com. Look on the benchmarking and best practices page, and you'll find a helpful, extensive list of benchmarking groups and industrial associations. You could also check out www.solutionmatrix.com, which has an extensive list of professional and industrial associations, not all of which would be engaged in benchmarking, so the search can be slow. As I said, there are individual consultants who can help you with training, orientation, and conducting studies. I caution you that referrals to such resources are best done on a one-on-one basis from one colleague referring to another. I say this because consultants can be expensive, they will be privy to your operations, and they can impact your reputation. So you want to be very sure you are getting someone who does what they say, that they walk the talk. Finally, I want to encourage you not to be discouraged by today's uncertain environment. Whether it is the ebb and flow of the world's economies, tough competition between regions and countries for markets and resources, or cultural animus that occasionally trips into hostility, don't be troubled. We already know that it's a jungle out there. But as in the TV show I mentioned at the start of the program, Adrian Monk always overcomes his phobias and solves the crime. It always works out well in the end, and it will for us too. Thank you. Oh, so it's not this one? Because I want that one in there.
We will now continue with the second question and answer session, and let me see where the next question is coming from. All right, that is Santo Domingo. Go ahead, please.
What are the challenges that an organization must face, a 21st century organization, in terms of applying new technologies and developing benchmarking techniques?
Well, the challenge in today relative to benchmarking, let me take that first, the challenge is to do it. The challenge is to get started, to develop a plan and a methodology, and to get the organization trained to go out and gather the data. The second challenge, which is related to the first part of your question, I think, and the things in the 21st century and the new technologies, is the implementation of those best practices, of making the changes within your organization that are essential to take advantage of the data and the new knowledge that you have acquired to make yourself more competitive in the 21st century.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Puebla, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
We're calling from the Benito Juárez School in Zacatlán, Puebla. And our question is the following. How can we then make innovation a constant factor in the organizations and for the organization to be committed with change? And this in the scope of being able to adopt benchmarking. How can we do this?
First of all, hello to all my friends in Puebla. I've had some wonderful times in that little town. The way to do that is, first of all, establish these as goals within your strategic plan, that you wish to be an innovationable company or organization. And second, that you are going to use benchmarking as a primary data source. Having put it into your strategic plan and having established those goals, they become objectives that need to be achieved. And like any other element in a strategic plan, you'll have to develop the implementation plans to make those happen. Which goes without saying that the management of the organization must believe that these are important things to do and that they will follow up to make sure that they happen.
Great. Thank you. And we go to Hidalgo, Mexico for our next question. Go ahead, please.
To all the members of the ITC network. And the question is, what percentage of our sales or income should we then allocate for research and development?
Great question. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that because I don't know your organization and there is no established number. It depends on where the organization is, the kind of business that you're in, and the technology that you pursue, and the lead time to development. The research, the investments in research depend both upon the kinds of research that you are doing, but also where you are relative to your own products and technology, and what the next generation of those will be, and what the lead time is to those. So it really has to do with product development lead time. I couldn't give you a number.
All right. Thank you. We go to Ecuador for our next question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Our question is from the University of Espíritu Santo of Guayaquil, and our question is the following. How can we implement benchmarking, or benchmarking, that is, in companies that work in a country that has serious political and social difficulties? How can we implement benchmarking in these countries?
Very good question. I don't know if we're talking about private enterprise and not knowing what kinds of conditions or situations that you're describing. I guess I would be inclined to say it shouldn't make very much difference. The issue, again, is within the organization, does senior management believe that benchmarking is a tool that they can use to improve the organization? To convince management of that would require a couple of things, one of which is to do some research and find a comparable organization, preferably in your own country, if not somewhere in your own hemisphere, that has already been through this process and established it, that you can then share with management as an example of success. The other is, as was mentioned earlier, I'd refer you to Bob Camp's book. I would refer you to my own book, which is the Manager's Guide on Benchmarking, which is available in Spanish, as a handbook that a manager could read and see what has to be done. And I think when you see it as a clear process, what's going on in the politics and the society around you shouldn't have very much influence.
All right, very good. Next question comes from Sabinas, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
The question is, if we have a franchise and we have to be different in terms of innovation from the owner of the franchise, should we then adopt blindly the guidelines of the owners? And how could we apply benchmarking in terms of franchises?
Good question. That's kind of a tough situation. I'm familiar with organizations who have that problem, and sometimes it requires you to go back to the franchise owner and share with them the dilemma and see if there's anything in their experience that you can adopt. In many instances, however, assuming that you're in the retail business, there's a lot of things that you can do through benchmarking at the local level that without changing product, changing the supplies the franchisor provides, that you can improve your own business, whether that's time at shelves. I've worked with small chains of video stores that owners of individual video stores have been able to improve their own productivity, and it worked the other way where the franchisor came and said, wow, you're doing something new and different, let's see if we can adopt what you're doing for the rest of the organization.
Excellent. For our next question, we stay in Mexico, but we go to Puebla. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I would first like to congratulate our speaker. It's a great speech and modules. What are the pioneer organizations in terms of benchmarking? And please mention 3 that have been successful.
Oh, my Lord. Good question. Xerox Corporation, number 1. FedEx, American Airlines, IBM, Motorola, Ford, and Ford throughout all of its companies and affiliations and operations. Almost every international corporation in the world today, I would say, has been successful. And there are many organizations in Latin America who have adopted benchmarking and are using it with a great deal of success.
All right, one last question, staying in Puebla. Go ahead, please.
This is from the school Carmen Cerdán from Titlan, Mexico. We've considered excellent strategies within these video conferences. But in terms of this, we ask this general question. In a country that is far from globalization, how can we then educate our students at primary level to really be aware of globalization? How can we educate our students?
I understand we're running short on time. Real quick answer is introduce your students to the web. Introduce your students to international searches of all kinds on the web. I think that would be the fastest way to do it.
Thank you for your excellent questions, but we have run out of time. We hope that you have enjoyed participating once again in this exciting multilingual and multinational program. We would like to give special recognition to those who have met the requirements for obtaining the ITC Certificate of Participation for this year's series. We invite you to participate in the first video conference of our 2005 series, Managerial Excellence and Networked Collaboration for Global Competitiveness, airing February 17, 2005, entitled Fundraising for the Business and Social Organizational Models, Strategies and Techniques. For additional information on this video conference series, please consult your participants manual, where you will find the dates and specific topics for each program, or visit the ITC website. On behalf of all of us, I thank you for your ongoing participation and interest in this program. Thank you, and see you soon.